She rejected you. Then you moved on, and suddenly she is furious. Here is why. She told you she was not interested. Maybe she said it directly. Maybe she made it clear through her behavior. Either way, the message was received. She did not want you. So you did the healthy thing, the self-respecting thing. You accepted it. You took your energy elsewhere. You started focusing on yourself again. You moved on. And then something happened that made absolutely no sense to you. She got angry. She became distant in a pointed way. She made comments. She seemed bothered. She acted like you had done something wrong by simply respecting the position she had already made clear. And you stood there genuinely confused. Because you followed the rules she set. You honored her choice. You let go with dignity. And somehow, that made her more upset than the pursuit ever did. You are not imagining it. This happens. It is real. And today, we are going to explain exactly why it happens using psychology, human behavior science, and the honest truth about how this dynamic actually works. Before we go any further, subscribe and hit the like button right now. This channel is built for men who want honest answers to the questions most people are too uncomfortable to address directly. And here is something I want you to hear before we get into the psychology. If you have ever been confused, frustrated, or hurt by this exact situation, you are not alone and you are not crazy. But understanding why it happens is only half the picture. The other half is knowing how to carry yourself through it with the kind of clarity and self-respect that changes everything. The Magnetic Masculinity. Ebook in the description is the complete guide to that. Men who have read it say it finally made sense of patterns they had been confused by for years. The link is in the description. Scroll down and grab it right now while this is fresh in your mind. Here is the situation most men find themselves in and never fully understand. A woman makes it clear she is not interested. The man, after some time processing it, accepts the reality and shifts his focus. He starts working on himself. He starts showing up differently. Maybe he is seen talking to other women. Maybe he stops reaching out. Maybe he just becomes visibly okay with where things stand. And she notices. And something in her shifts. She becomes cooler toward him in a way that has an edge to it. She makes a comment about him moving on too fast. She brings up the situation in a tone that suggests he has done something wrong. She seems almost offended by his recovery. And the man is left trying to solve an equation that does not make logical sense. She did not want him. He accepted that. He moved on. And now she is behaving as if his acceptance of her decision was the problem. To any rational mind, this is completely contradictory. If she did not want him, why would his moving on bother her? The answer is not about logic. It is about psychology, specifically about the way ego, perceived value, and unconscious biological programming interact in ways that produce responses that feel completely irrational from the outside, but make complete sense once you understand what is actually driving them. Psychologist Dr. Roy Baumeister, whose research on ego, self-esteem, and interpersonal dynamics is among the most referenced in modern social psychology, identified a pattern he called ego threat in the context of social relationships. When a person rejects someone, they unconsciously establish a specific power dynamic in their mind. They are the one who chose. They hold the position of selectivity. The person who was rejected occupies a lower position in that internal hierarchy. When the rejected person moves on, especially quickly and especially visibly, that hierarchy is disrupted. The person who made the choice of rejection suddenly finds themselves in an unexpected position. Their rejection is no longer the defining event of the dynamic. His recovery is. And that shift in the perceived power balance triggers what Baumeister describes as an ego-protective response. An emotional reaction designed to restore the hierarchy that his recovery has disrupted. In simpler terms, as long as he was still affected by her rejection, she could feel like the one with the power. The moment he moved on, that power shifted. And her anger is her ego's attempt to get it back. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on the psychology of scarcity adds another dimension to this. His research found that the perceived value of anything, including a person's attention and desire, increases the moment it becomes less available. When he was pursuing her, his attention was abundant and therefore easy to take for granted. The moment he stopped, his attention became scarce. And scarcity creates desire. Not necessarily romantic desire, but the desire to maintain access to something that you did not realize you valued until it was no longer guaranteed. She does not necessarily want him now that he has moved on, but her brain is registering the loss of something it had become accustomed to having available. And that registration produces an emotional response that looks from the outside like anger, but is actually a more complicated mix of ego protection, loss aversion, and the sudden realization that she had more power over the situation than she consciously knew. Finally, evolutionary psychologist Dr. David Buss identified what he called mate value reassessment in his research on human attraction and courtship. His findings showed that when a person who has been pursuing someone suddenly stops and visibly redirects their energy, the person being pursued unconsciously reassesses that person's value upward. She said no when he was pursuing her. She said no to the man who was available, consistent, and clearly interested. But the man who moved on without bitterness, without begging, and without any apparent damage to his self-worth is a different signal altogether. That man has just demonstrated something she did not see before, that her yes was never his only option. And that realization, even if she never consciously acknowledges it, changes how her biology evaluates him. Not always into attraction, but almost always into a response that is more emotionally charged than the casual disinterest she felt before. And here is what this means for you. Here is the practical truth that all of this psychology points toward. Moving on after rejection is not just healthy. It is the single most accurate test of your own value that exists in a dating dynamic. The man who cannot move on after rejection reveals something important about himself. He has built the rejected woman into something so significant in his mind that her no has the power to define his direction. And that level of investment in someone who has already opted out is one of the clearest signals of low self-worth available. The man who moves on with his dignity intact reveals the opposite. He communicates without a single word that his sense of self, his direction, and his sense of his own worth exist completely independently of her decision. That he was whole before her, and he will continue to be whole without her. That communication is not a strategy. It is not a manipulation designed to make her reconsider. It is simply the honest expression of a man who respects himself enough to accept reality and continue building his life regardless of how any particular person responds to him. And as the psychology we just covered makes clear, that honest expression of self-respect is one of the most powerful things she will ever witness from a man she has rejected. Here is how to handle her anger. When she expresses anger, coldness, or pointed behavior in response to your moving on, here is exactly how to carry yourself. Do not explain yourself. You do not owe her a justification for your recovery. Moving on after rejection is not a behavior that requires an apology or an explanation. It is the healthy and appropriate response to being told no. Do not become defensive. Defensiveness signals that her reaction has the power to shake you. It does not. Her being bothered by your self-respect is not your problem to solve. Do not reconnect out of guilt. This is the trap that most men fall into when they sense her shift in energy. They interpret her sudden increased interest as a sign that she may have changed her mind, and they redirect their attention back toward her. This almost always confirms her original assessment rather than creating new attraction. Remain calm and warm. Not cold. Not distant as a punishment. Simply calm. The same grounded, settled energy that allowed you to accept her rejection with dignity is the same energy that serves you when she reacts to your recovery. Continue moving forward. The most powerful thing you can do in response to her anger is nothing dramatic. Just continue being the man who is building his life, maintaining his standards, and directing his energy toward the things and the people that are genuinely choosing him. That continued forward movement is not a response to her. It is simply who you are. And who you are does not change based on whether she is watching or what she thinks about it. Here is the truth underneath everything we have covered today. Her anger at your recovery is not really about you. It is about her own psychology confronting something it was not prepared for. The evidence that you were more okay with her no than she expected. That her rejection did not break you. That you are, in fact, Exactly the kind of man whose self-worth cannot be determined by any single person's decision. And that evidence, even though it frustrates her in the moment, is also the clearest demonstration of your value that you have given her since the beginning. You will not always get her back after moving on. That is not the point. The point is that the man you become in the process of moving on with your dignity completely intact is a man who does not need to get her back to know his own worth. And that man, the one who accepted rejection without breaking and moved forward without bitterness, is the version of you that every future relationship in your life will be built on. Do not dim that man to make her more comfortable with her own decision. Let him be exactly who he is. If this helped something click today, like this video and subscribe. Share it with a man you know who is in the middle of this exact situation right now, because someone in your life needs to hear this. And let me be straight with you one last time before you close this. Understanding why she reacts this way is important. But the deeper work, building the kind of self-worth that makes moving on feel natural rather than forced, that does not happen from understanding alone. The Magnetic Masculinity ebook is the practical system for building that self-worth from the ground up. It is honest, it is complete, and it is built specifically for men who are tired of being confused by these dynamics and ready to build the version of themselves that is simply too grounded to be destabilized by them. I spent 15 years studying this. You can read the whole thing in a few hours, and those few hours will change not just how you handle rejection, but how rejection feels. Because the man on the other side of this work does not move on from rejection, he simply continues forward. And he does it so naturally that the question of whether she is angry about it never crosses his mind. The link is in the description. Go grab it today. That man is one decision away from where you are standing right now.